I gotta check. Look, this is a 2.0 liter TFSI turbocharged Audi engine, direct injected. Because it's direct injected, it has some problems because there's some bad parts that it's not Audi's fault. It is Audi's fault, kind of, but the parts suppliers gave them bad parts. Audi doesn't make the timing chain. They don't make the timing chain tensioner. They didn't make the pistons. They have parts suppliers for this. But it turns out that whenever this engine came out fresh in somewhere around 2009, there was some problems in the factory components that were developed whenever everything was brand new. Now the pistons went through, technically they didn't go through a first revision, technically they went through a second revision. And I've already got a piston video where I explain it, but this time I'm just gonna take the block apart whenever I explain stuff. And I'm getting ready to get to work, so calm down. The first piston, okay, so I was the piston guy. From about 2009 to 2011 was when these were affected, 3 years. I started working on them in about 2013 to about, it ended around 2018. So when all of them came through the shop. The fix is to replace the pistons. You gotta put a whole new piston in it. Not just one, 4 of them, because it's a 4-cylinder engine. And I've already explained this in my other video. There's a lot of overlaps in my videos. But this is the original oil control ring design with tiny little holes in it. Now this is a Klobberschnitt piston, or whatever you call it. It's on this paperwork here. It's Kolben Schmidt. Now, if that's not how you say it, tell me I'm wrong. As far as I'm aware, look, I wasn't even aware of this brand, but as far as I'm aware, they've got expensive ones, which are like somewhere around $700 for 4 pistons, and I can also find them super cheap on the internet, where you can find 4 pistons for less than $150. In some cases, they're as cheap as about $120 for all 4. Now, you're not gonna get any kind of quality control or any kind of good part, especially if you're putting it inside your cylinder when you're paying like $30 a piece for them. That doesn't make any sense. You get what you pay for. What I've found, what I've come to be aware of after buying lots of parts, for instance, Mahle, I don't even know if that's how you say it, but you guys know what I'm talking about, the parts people. Mahle, I think it's called. Anyway, they've also got expensive parts and cheap parts. They've even sold pistons, and I bought cheap pistons before, and I thought, hey, I recognize that name brand. That's a good name brand. What I think's happening, and I know this for a fact with NGK spark plugs, is there's massive industry in China for counterfeiting. Something like even a piston. Well, they do it with spark plugs. They do it with everything. They counterfeit the part, whatever it is, and then they put it in original name brand packaging. They wrap it up in packaging. They put it in the actual box. They put the sticker on it. They make it look like it's legit, man. But what you're getting from some of these knockoff sources is you're getting knockoff counterfeit parts. When you buy parts, you have to get it from an actual legitimate parts supplier. This guy from Amazon or this guy from eBay or whatever. No, you have to get it from Rock Auto. You have to get it from CTS. You have to get it from, you have to get it from these major parts suppliers on the internet, or you have to go to your local dealership to get good parts. The quality control on aftermarket parts disappoints me almost every single time. And yeah, it's okay to put aftermarket parts on stuff that's easy to replace, or if you don't care about being stranded. But let's say you do care about being stranded, or you do care about the engine that you're putting together, that you're putting your time and your money and your labor into. it's definitely worth it to pay like 4, 5, 6 times sometimes. Aftermarket parts can be really cheap compared to the jaw-dropping price of authentic German parts. But it is what it is. If you want a good engine, you gotta buy good parts. And as much as I'm gonna be helping people and putting engines together, and as much as I would like to cheap out with cheap parts, I'm gonna be as completely honest as possible with the engines I put together. I'm gonna document the engines I put together. If I put an engine together and I put it to the side, I might put it up for sale, or I might even go do a job on the road and help one of you guys out for my YouTube business. I'm looking at this like a business, even though I've got the entrepreneur mindset. So I'm gonna try to do this 2-liter stuff and build a 2-liter community, and then I'm gonna springboard it off into a really fun YouTube channel in about a couple years from now, once I get enough followers from this engine right here. So you're gonna get really good, valuable information from this, but what you're also gonna get is an awesome YouTube channel in the future whenever I can get some momentum built. I need at least 100,000 subscribers before I can start doing really good stuff. Before I can really start spending money on the creativity. But I did have a chunk of money and I was gonna put it into a landscaping business, but I decided to put it back into this 2-liter community and into my parts collection and into my cars so I can help you. So basically the money that I have accumulated, my life savings, I'm putting it into the 2-liter community. And if anyone does have me come out to their house, even if it's multiple states away for mobile mechanic type service, I will bend over backwards to do anything I can to prove my work and my abilities. So I'm actually going to put an effort into the videos like this, and then quality over quantity, but I'm still going to try to be putting fun videos out, fun quantity videos out. There will be comedy videos, there will be mechanic comedy, they'll be destroying stuff, they'll be fixing stuff. There's gonna be so many different ideas. I've got so many different ideas for videos. I have not even scratched the surface yet. So let's just get to work. Right after this. Okay, right here we got a block. I can identify this block by looking at this sensor right here. That big fat sensor on the side right there, that's the crankshaft speed sensor. And that has a big fat plug on it, so that was affected through 2009 to 2012. 2013 and on, in most cases it has this aluminum intake manifold that's slightly different, and it has, see, this is the turbo side, this is the intake side. It has this sideways sensor with a smaller plug. Now, this plug is interchangeable. It slides right in and bolts in the same way. We'll get to all the other stuff later. This is about a block here, right? But to show this engine is a junkyard engine. It's a good replacement engine that I got from the internet. So I'm gonna be disassembling that and showing and explaining how to repower or replace with a good used engine. I'm gonna be talking all about it in the next video that I do. But this video is a good block, but what happened? It came out of time, it bent valves. Do I have a cylinder head laying around here with bent valves? I'm sure I got one somewhere. that bent them on the intake and exhaust. Typically they only bend them on intake, but whenever they get bent, all right, it comes at a time. You have camshafts spinning on the top end. This is the top end of your engine. This is cylinder head. This is the bottom half of your engine. This would be called a short block. If it was a long block, it would have a cylinder head on the top. Technically, this is a long block with a few accessories installed. Now, when it comes at a time, see, this is the timing chain issue. The old style chain looks like this with links like this. The new style chain has links that look like this. So if your old timing chain looks like this, and you don't have a tensioner that looks like this with this style, see, I explain this a lot, but everyone needs to, if you watch only one of my videos, you need to know. This is the bad style tensioner. See, the only thing holding this tensioner plunger into place I just dropped it, it's so small. Is this little tiny paw right here with those 3 small back cut teeth. See those little back cut teeth? And in this case, they're actually a little bit worn. Anyway, those back cut teeth go in that window and hold that tensioner plunger into place. All it takes is for that to slip just one time. And this timing chain that goes to the cylinder head comes out of time. And it's called an interference engine. When you have something called an interference engine, that means that the bottom end will interfere with the top end if it comes out of time. Or they call them a freewheeling engine if it doesn't. And I'm sure there's other names. Put them in the comments if you got your other names. But the pistons are very hard compared to the valves. The valves will tap the pistons. In most cases, they'll stay in these, see that right here, they tapped up here, made little eyebrows. But most of the time, they'll stay in this pocket here. And they'll just extend out and bend. And then you'll have no more compression, but the bottom end is still good. Almost without exception, the bottom end is still just like this with just little tiny marks on the piston. Now I have seen maybe about 1 out of every 15 or 1 out of every 20, it's possible to bend a valve so severely that it drops into the cylinder and it bounces around a little bit and it causes cylinder damage. So I would say about 1 out of every 15 or 1 out of every 20, you're gonna have a junk block because that valve dropped in there and scored up the cylinder. Now, this one, what I always do is I look, not only do I look to see if the silicone has been replaced, because a lot of times you can tell if it's had pistons just by looking at the bead of silicone. Now, whoever did this piston job did a really good job at laying the silicone because it's not, it looks like a factory bead almost all the way around it. There's no real good indication that someone didn't know what they were doing when they put the silicone on. A lot of times you'll see it coming out pretty extensively and you'll see some inconsistencies with the sealant. But what I did, especially around this front case, but I already took the front case off. But what I did do is I looked at these pistons, and these pistons say they've got a date on them. See, May 6th of 2015. And these are AM pistons. See, at the end of this, is there a part number on them? No, but the AM pistons are the 21 millimeter rods. See, the AM is at the end here. And the PM pistons, you'll see PM, they'll be the 23 millimeter. Now, when I say rod, I'm talking about the wrist pin. This wrist pin here came in two different sizes. 2009 to 2012 was the 21 millimeter pin, and 2013 all the way up to about 2017 is the 23 millimeter pin. So that correlates with the wrist pin is what goes through the center of your piston. So what we did at the dealership is we would put, let me cut and get back to you. All right, I'm back. Can we get a good view? Let's put the engine parallel to the camera. So what I was gonna do was, even though these are 2015 pistons, these pistons have been replaced already. I'm gonna take them out again anyway, and we're gonna look at the carbon buildup since they've been replaced. Do I have a mile number? I wish I did, I don't. I'm assuming that these have been in no more than 50,000 miles. I'm assuming that by 10,000 miles per year average mile driven. Plus, this engine has been at my house for probably over a year. So 50,000 miles is probably a little bit more than what it went since it's had pistons. We're gonna look at the carbon buildup on 50,000 mile pistons because that's what I say. Now, let's just start ripping it apart. If you don't take this oil level sensor out first, you'll most likely break it. So I pop it off as just by hand. This one came off with the O-ring still installed. They very rarely do that. This O-ring typically sticks to the oil pan, and you have to pop it off and then carefully put it back in its groove. What I like to do with these nuts is I like to put them right back where they came from. This oil pan is coming off and it's gonna be cleaned. This has oil residue on it. You have to put this someplace that's not dusty. Is there a sequence in taking the oil pan off? Absolutely not. Like I was saying, it's come to my attention that most of y'all can't do things the way I do them, so I'm gonna explain the conventional method of getting this oil pan off. But first, so that took entirely too long to find, but this is one of the things that I'll be showing in multiple of my teardown videos. See, I've got a stack of 4 of these. And what you want to do is, as you take things apart in sequence, you put the bolts in. And then if you have to go more, if you need more pockets, you pull it off and you get another one. And you set them in sequence. So that then whenever you put stuff together, it's so much easier. You go this pocket, this pocket, this pocket, this pocket. You work your way back. Okay, this is the good bolt method. And then furthermore, we have cell phones like I'm using right now to record this. So if you don't know how to put it back together or how to take it apart, or you think you're gonna forget, take a picture, or better yet, film yourself explaining how you take it apart. You don't need to screw stuff up nowadays with forgetfulness. So now, what I would suggest is get yourself some good screwdrivers. I like to use screwdrivers to take pans off. I've learned this lesson myself. No one taught me this lesson. This is a lesson that you're learning from me. I'm passing it on to you. The reason why screwdrivers are very nice to get pans off is because it's got a very, very skinny profile. It gets bigger, but the profile is super tiny. Now you could find a chisel just like this, but the other good reason is it's chrome and it's real slick. Now, when you're taking some type of pan off, you want to think about the area, about where strength is, and also where is it going to be least susceptible to bend, or if you do bend it, are you going to be able to bend it back into shape easy? Also, if you'll notice, there's different parts on this pan that are specifically made for prying off. There's a spot right here. There's a spot on the other side, exactly like that, over here. Now, I'm more inclined to want to get it off the back, so I'm just going to show you how to do it from the back. I'm just going to take the screwdriver like this. I'm going to put it in the back. And now, I stuck that much in there. That much. If you'll notice, it broke half the sealant off. Let's go ahead and take a look at the pan. It has some crud in it, but nothing crazy. Surprisingly, it's a little bit sludgy. A little bit sludgy. Typically, synthetic oil doesn't get sludgy, but this is the first time the pan has ever been off. This is why it would be a good idea to keep your oil changed often, or maybe every once in a great while. It's not a bad idea to do an engine flush. I'll talk about that more in the future, but this definitely 100% has had the oil pan off before. I can tell where it's been scraped by a rotary grinder. Also, the sealant looks different than whenever it comes off for the first time. This isn't important. You can put it anywhere because everything needs cleaned extensively. Now we have this is a baffle right here. This keeps your oil centered in the bottom of the pan so that when you take hard corners and brakes and all these things, the oil is, see, it's kept baffled into this pickup tube area. Now, this tray right here is your upper oil pan tray, but it's also your crank scraper. We'll get there when we get there. But let's go ahead and take the baffle out first. There's 3 screws. Now this is a mechanic tip right here. If you'll notice, my socket keeps on falling off of my impact. That's because after you use an impact for a while, there's a little ring on the top of it called a bull ring, and it flattens out on the sides and you no longer hold your sockets in. And then you're constantly holding your socket onto your impact. You know that ring only costs like $10 or something, maybe like $15 for a pack of 3, something like, I don't know. It's probably a lot cheaper if you buy them off the internet and not from the tool guy. But you'll save yourself a lot of headache if you just go ahead and keep maintenance on your guns and replace that little tiny ring. For instance, I won't have to dig my socket out of the oil tray. Now, this upper oil pan, the upper oil pan is this right here. This is your baffle, but this doesn't really get cleaned. I mean, if you have the means to clean it, or if you have a parts washer and you want to clean it, that's fine. But this typically just has such a tiny little film on it that you just set it to the side in a perfectly clean area and hope that it's not anywhere dusty to where you would get any dirt that accumulated on it, because then you have to clean it. But typically with this, I try to put it in a very clean spot to the side. Now we're down to our oil pump. This is gonna be, on the older ones, it's triple square, and on the newer ones, you're gonna have T45 Torx. Now there's no sequence on taking the pump off. You can take it off however you want to take it off. There's also no gasket on the pump. What I've found is this screen likes to pop out, and they never cause a problem. So you're perfectly fine with putting it back in the pump. But I've also noticed if you don't put it in the pump, it'll also be perfectly fine. But I would suggest putting the screen back in the pump, because you might be able to pick up enough trash if you don't put this screen back in. It's possible to pick up trash and then score your bearings. So it would be very nice for you to track down that screen and pop it back into the oil pump as soon as you pull the oil pump off. And then when you set it down, it could also fall back out. So just keep tabs on this oil pump screen right here. And now we're gonna put the oil pump in a safe spot, but we're also gonna go ahead and spin it and make sure it spins absolutely freely and perfect. And you also wanna take a look inside your pickup tube and make sure that there's no metal or gunk or plastic or anything broken or weird looking in there. It should just look like a normal screen inside there. Now let's set this, for now, we're gonna just set this inside the oil pan so it doesn't make a mess. Now we're gonna take our upper oil pan off, but before we do that, I'm gonna track down a rag. Forget the rag, I gotta work. Now, is there a sequence to taking the bolts out of this upper oil pan? No, it's fine. It's not gonna warp or distort anything. There's a couple different ways you could take these bolts out. You can either go ahead and pull them all out with a magnet, or you can just take this tray off, which you're probably gonna need to pry it off. It doesn't take much. To prove it, I'm gonna take the same flathead screwdriver that I took the oil pan off. I like to go back here in one of these ears and just barely press up. And then the thing just pops right off. Now, what I typically like to do is I just like to set it like this, straight down, and let the oil drip off of it. But you're gonna wanna put it in a drain pan or on cardboard or something so it keeps the oil in place. Now we're down to the rods, the pistons, the business end. I never take the main bearings apart. I have before, they always look beautiful. the rod bearings actually always look beautiful too. So we're gonna inspect the rod bearings. The rod bearings are the bearings that go on the rod. The main bearings are the bearings that go right here in the main crankshaft journal. So what we gotta do is we gotta get this inverted torque socket. It's an E10. Now, in my previous video that I deleted, I showed taking these off with an impact. I don't recommend doing that unless you've got tons of experience, because you can strip these out pretty easily. So I've got a long 3/8 drive. It might even be better to use a 1/2 inch drive, but when you take them off by hand like this, you get a good feel on how it's flush. And if you hit it with an impact, it's possible that you could strip the bolt head out. We don't need to be stripping anything out in the engine. If you were to strip the head of one of these bolts out, which I've never done, which I have done, but I've never done so bad that I wasn't able to retrieve the bolt out without, still using a socket. I've had to use an impact driver before. I've never had to use a grinder. That would be a nightmare. You would never want to try to grind the tip of a bolt off, because then you would have, that's madness. But now, when I have all of the rod bolts broken loose, I can unbolt them. Now, I'll admit, I skipped a step. But it's not imperative. Okay, first off, I didn't take the rod caps off first. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you either keep these rod caps on or you take them off and put them back together before you scrape any of this gunk. Because there's going to be gasket surface and there's going to be gunk where this upper oil pan was. So get very familiar with some razor blades, because this is how you clean everything on an engine. You don't use a rotary grinder on an engine. You use a razor blade. When an engine is opened up and you have engine oil, all right, you're never really gonna be able to get, unless this engine block goes to a hot tank, you're never gonna be able to get everything clean. So you create as little mess as possible. And how you do that is by using a razor blade. Now, this is extremely imperative on cleaning the cylinder heads, because the cylinder heads have cam trays. And I'll talk about this more extensively in my cylinder head video when I redo it. But if you use a rotary grinder on this camshaft tray, you'll be taking away from your clearance, your oil clearance in your camshafts, and that's a huge no-no. That's like a huge beginner mistake. So I'll be explaining that extensively in my redo cylinder head video. But like I said, get very familiar with razor blades, because this is how we clean everything. We take it at just almost straight up and down at a super slight angle, and then you glide the crud off the edge. And then you scrape it off. You get some longer strokes. Do the same thing to the other side here. Now, if you'll notice, I'm staying on the inside edge. I'm not taking it all the way outside here towards the engine. Whenever I first start it, I'm just scraping it from a few millimeters in all the way out. And then whenever the majority of it's clean, then I can take a long stroke all the way through the side. Kind of like a wiper blade. Now that's clean. That's good enough. Good enough for now. It's gonna get more oily, so we don't need to make it perfect. We're just getting the crud off of it because we don't want to get any crud in our bearings. I'm not an engine shop. I'm not a rebuild shop. This is just for replacing pistons for oil consumption. We take it apart, we put it right back together. Now, this is how most people are gonna take it out. They're gonna take their grubby little hands in here and they're gonna pull it straight up. Now, what happened? It was a little bit sloppy and it didn't take the bearing out with it. Now, first off, it's a good idea to clean your hands off first. So, we're gonna clean our hands off. We're gonna leave this rag to the side. And then, this is my little trick. I take my hands on either side of the bolt and I rock it side to side, and then it pulls the bearing out with it. Now take a look at that bearing. It's almost perfect. The other thing that you want to pay attention to is someone actually put arrows facing forward. Now that's completely unnecessary. You don't need to do that because it's got a 44 with a line under it and they're all facing the same direction. So the 44s all face this way. So if you can't remember that, just take a picture of it. You don't need to mar it up with, I know for a fact I didn't do this engine job because I would never do that. Not that it's a horrible thing, but it's just super unnecessary. If you're getting in there with scribes and tools and things to mark it, this isn't even paint. This is like someone scribed it. That's dumb. Don't do that. Take a picture. But now we need a clean place to put this. So, and it has to go in order. So like I said, these all go in order, but we have to go 1 cylinder, 2 cylinder, 3 cylinder, 4 cylinder. So I'm gonna set it just directly below here, but they're all gonna be in order. Now let's see the same tip right here. See how the bearing did not pick up? What you do is you push down a little bit. Now the bearing was not perfectly centered in this one, so I'm just gonna very carefully center it out. Now it's centered and I can just install it back perfectly like I took it out. One more thing. These caps are gonna look like they're broken on the ends. That's how they're designed. They're not flush cut, they're broke cut. That's just how they do it. That's actually a better way of joining the rods than how they used to do it. Now the key to taking this off with the bearing still in it is you kind of have, when you rock this back and forth, you're kind of pushing the rod down a little bit. Now we got one more. No bearing. We're gonna put it back in. I rocked it back and forth and pulled the bearing out with the cap. Now that tip and that trick right there, you're not gonna get that from anyone unless they've taken a bunch of engines apart, and I mean a bunch. Because how I used to do that is like with a magnet or something. And you don't really want to touch the bearing at all if you don't have to. Because even if you put a magnet on it or touch it or anything, you could get a piece of, all it takes is anything on it and you can mess up your bearing clearances. Bearing clearances are huge. When you're dealing with engines, that's what makes these so sketchy to mess with, because now you're responsible, after putting it back together, you're responsible for this not having an oil pressure issue. Now what I like to do to take the rods out Lost my... Okay, I just had a quarter drive extension there, but this is a locking extension. So the socket there, you have to pull the sleeve back to put the socket on. Apparently I didn't have it all the way on when I showed the camera. But anyway, you don't just want to use a long extension. You want to put some type of quarter drive socket on the end of it. You want to make sure everything's clean. And then since this has a little taper on it, I'm going to be able to fit it into the rod, into one of the holes. And then I can push straight down. What this allows me to do is to get 100% accuracy on pushing straight down and not having a chance on scratching the cylinder wall. Now I've seen other people use wood or like a wood handle of a hammer or something like that. That's fine as well, but sometimes you're not gonna get way down in there and you need to push it all the way through. And this is the thing that you're gonna get inside this hole, and you're gonna be able to push it all the way down through very carefully. Now, the same thing goes with these pistons. They're directional. Let's take a look at the bearing real quick. The bearing looks like it's in very good shape. It's just got break-in wear. A super tiny amount of scoring, but look, that's gonna be normal. You're gonna get a little bit of wear on something that has some age on it. We're gonna set these pistons just like this, just like we did with the caps. They're all in order. We're getting ready to inspect them. I'm gonna take them all out first. Now, I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see this on camera, but there's little slots here. There's a slot, slot, slot. All right, those are the oil control ring. That's what gets clogged up on these things. And this one already had pistons 50,000 miles ago, roughly. These slots are pretty much all the way clogged up. So if I would have installed this engine with good pistons, because I checked the date, they were updated pistons already, updated. Okay, they don't have the waffle ring. I'm still learning, but I know more than most people, we'll put it that way. But the way that Audi at the dealership was telling me how to do things was to always put these in. See, this is Audi piston. This is an official Audi piston. So from 2009 to 2011, we would be putting this style piston back in. That's why some people put the bigger rods with the updated style pistons. The updated style, the newest style, is a 23 millimeter wrist pin with the waffle ring, oil control ring. And apparently that's the style that won't clog up like this. But I'm still figuring out that these things are still clogging up. So all the VWs, all the Audis, everything except pretty much brand new stuff or stuff that's had 2013 plus with waffle oil control rings is all suspect for heavy oil consumption. Sorry to say it, but if you want it done right, you have to get the real expensive stuff. You have to get a 2013 or better engine, or the bigger rods and the waffle style oil control ring, because we still got issues, people. I wasn't even wanting to take this apart. I took this apart for a YouTube video to show you that this style oil control ring is still susceptible, and this style is in all the VWs, it's in all the Audis. I've got a 2015 engine and it's still got this style ring in it. They might not have changed it until 2016 or 2017. I hate to say it. More videos coming at you real soon. Just stay tuned, and the quality is going to keep on increasing. And if you want something specifically, tell me in the comments. Or if you don't like something about the videos, or you want me to be faster, or you want me to explain something better, help me make better videos. Thank you very much. And Naptown Tuner. Now look at my hands. You see this crud? See this crust? This is the crud and the crust that clogs up the holes in this oil control ring, this oil scraper ring. It's carbon, it's crusty carbon. So on this one, since everything looks good and everything looks new, I'm just gonna be cleaning everything up. I'm gonna be cleaning the holes and I'm gonna put it all back together and I'm gonna run it and I'm gonna see what happens. I'll show a video of it all cleaned up and being put back together. To be completely fair, I'm trying to get the best view possible. I did blow compressed air on it and it's not completely clogged. There was some oil still in there, not allowing you to see through the holes. See a small hole there. Large hole there.